Indian nationalism contrasting WhatsApp propaganda with historical facts. I request the speaker, Professor S. Irfan Habib, and the chair, Professor Gopal Guru, to kindly take their seats on the stage. The chair of the session is Professor Gopal Guru. He retired from the Center for Political Studies, JNU, New Delhi, and is currently the editor of the Economic and Political Weekly. He is one of the foremost public intellectuals of his generation. His work and writing has inspired a lot of us, and I really don't think he requires any further introduction. Professor S. Irfan Habib is a historian of science based at the Center for Studies in Science Policy, JNU. Professor Habib's scholarship spans a vast array of themes, ranging from social history of science to the radical legacy of Bhagat Singh's political thought. He is here today to address us on a particular form of distortion of history that has appeared in sharp relief in recent times in the form of social media propaganda. This is a theme that Mumbai Collective has picked up with some alacrity over the last two editions as well.
I want to begin by saying that the last couple of years we have been such nationalists that I feel sometimes really awful that what sort of people we had, that before 2014 we created this country, brought it up to 2014 without nationalism, without love, without loving the country, without loving the country, without being nationalists, without being patriots, without being Rashtrabhaks, or other different names. And despite all that, despite the lack of all that, we could come from 1947 to 2014 and prepare a platform for our great leader to address the whole world and speak from rooftop that this is a country which he is going to take forward. How it has reached where he has reached, where he is speaking from, he won't talk about it. He will talk about things which have happened from 2014 onwards. And most of the things, actually nationalism is not something which is theoretical, it's not, I don't have to get into it and I'm not touching that. Nationalism is street nationalism. Everything is nationalistically inspired, whether it is economy, whether it is demonetization, because demonetization has had lots of goalposts, which kept changing. But nationalism remained a permanent one, because national interest. Similarly, lots of things which are actually not historical or political or which shouldn't have anything to do with nationalism at all are nationally inspired. So surely that sort of nationalism we never had, because as a young person born and brought up in a city like Meerut in Uttar Pradesh, which had a huge turbulence at political level, social level, communal, all sorts of things. Despite that, I never felt that sort of nationalism while in my growing up years. You never felt the need of a flag. You could be a nationalist without a flag. We should actually thank Naveen Jindal that he actually gave us that flag which we can hoist on our houses. We were not allowed to do that, except for 2 days, 26 January and 15th August. So where was our nationalism till then? Today, our nationalism is confined to a flag, to slogans which are being used. So in this context, we come to history. Now, what is this nationalism which we actually inherited? Who gave this to us? We were not a nation from centuries onwards. We were a modern nation only from the past 120 years, 100 years. It's a very modern concept. So, who gave this nationalism which we inherited after 1947, after freedom struggle? There was a churning which happened. We all know about that. I have some notes and I'm not going to go back to that because time is too short. So, during their churning, leaders like Gandhi, Nehru, Azad, Patel, and so many others, all of them got together, put their minds together, had a churning, had a debate, finally concluded that they should have a nationalism which is inclusive, which includes people, doesn't exclude people, which is pluralistic, which is empathetic, which has love, which is not based on hatred, This is Gandhi's famous statement in 1925 in Calcutta, while he's speaking in a Calcutta club. Is nationalism, does nationalism require hatred? No? He raised that question and then he talked about it, which I've included in my last book, which came out a year ago, where he very categorically says that nationalism needs empathy. You need to love each other. You need to build nation and nationalism through love. So, the nationalism we are talking about today is a nationalism which is based on othering. It actually needs an enemy first. Because you can't have a nationalism today in this context, the way nationalism is being defined, without having an enemy, whether it is enemy without or enemy within. So you have to have an enemy within the country, or you have to have an enemy in the neighborhood. So this combative nationalism is not the nationalism which we inherited. We cherished all these years a nationalism which was based on togetherness, which was based on empathy. Now, without going into details of these points, I'm just touching upon them. Through WhatsApp, what is happening? Most of the WhatsApp messages, the latest BBC survey actually proved it, that more than 30% WhatsApp messages are based on some false nationalistic pride. It has nothing to do with nationalism or nation. Anything which is said is actually covered or wrapped in some notion, weird sort of notion of nationalism, which is totally alien to us. So this is what in the past 3-4 years is happening through social media, through WhatsApp particularly, or through Facebook. But WhatsApp is more convenient and easy, so people use that more often. And one person writes, and it actually is shared by thousands and millions. Second thing which this WhatsApp has done to not only nationalism, to history itself, it has empowered a large number of people. You know what is happening today? Today, you don't need to go back to history books, or don't need to go back to people who know history or who understand how history is written, who know historical method. You don't have to do that. You write your own history. Write a message through WhatsApp, share it. So by doing this, you are not only writing history, you are creating history. You are creating things which didn't exist. And this is something so convenient. So it is very empowering. So lots of people actually feel so empowered that they don't need historians. They don't need history books. They are so irrelevant because those books speak of facts which actually don't suit them. Those facts don't suit their politics. Anything which they want to see in the past, telescope your present into the past and see which didn't exist. That can be created only through your WhatsApp message. You create it, and you have to be creative. You need to be creative, and there are lots of people who are very creative, and they are doing that so effectively and so successfully that they have created a parallel scholarship, WhatsApp scholarship. That is so amazing. And historians who actually seriously engage with history have a serious challenge from them. You have to actually respond to what, because I get phone calls from so many TV channels. For example, just last month, on 14th February, Valentine's Day, this is happening for the last 2 years. Last year also it happened. Quint called me, some other channels called me. He said, "Sir, we want your bite on this, this message which has gone viral on WhatsApp." And what is it about? "Oh, people are saying that we shouldn't actually celebrate Valentine's Day. This is the day when Bhagat Singh was hanged." I said, what is this? So this is what I'm saying, creating history. Bhagat Singh was hanged on 23rd March. 14th February has nothing to do with Bhagat Singh's life. Not even remotely. And people are actually sharing it. Then one young girl came to me from Quint, and she showed me how many million shares of this particular message about Bhagat Singh and about keeping away from Valentine, because it is Bhagat Singh's Shahadat Day. So this is how WhatsApp is being used to actually vandalize history, to vulgarize history, to rewrite history, to create history. Now, I'm not actually because of time, I'm just touching upon 2-3 main characters which are being used by this very historically conscious regime. Actually, they are more conscious. They are more conscious. They live in the past. They don't want to live in the present. They have no plan for the future. So most of the time they are in the past because past gives them lots of mileage. Because present has nothing to report. Future is bleak. So you actually live in the past. Past glorifies you. Past gives you lots of massage to your ego. You can create your own world. Like I do history of science as well. So you can create plastic surgery. You can create all sorts of things in the past and satisfy yourself, your ego, that you actually had a very, very glorious past. So why can't you have a glorious present? No? Whether you will have it or not, that's not discussed at all. Because you don't even do that. Don't even do anything to glorify your present or future. You only glorify your past. Now, there are three, four characters. One is Nehru. Nehru is a whipping boy. For everything he is responsible. And we know on WhatsApp what all messages are actually shared. Some of those messages I can't even share here. They are so vulgar. They are in such bad taste. Because by reading you can make out that it's not history at all. It can't happen. Anyway, those things I don't want to publicize them or give them credence by talking about them. But there is one man who is actually the favorite of the WhatsApp history, WhatsApp scholarship. Second is Sardar Patel. Sardar Patel, we have heard about him since morning several times. Sardar Patel is a hero because you have to put Nehru down. No, there's no love for Sardar Patel at all. They know, and they know the reasons why Sardar Patel is not their hero. It can't be their hero. But he is needed because Nehru has to be belittled. Nehru has to be shown his place. He didn't really belong to the place where he has gone. He needs a much smaller. He's a pygmy, and Sardar Patel is the size of the statue. So this is what the idea these people have. Now, if you go back to history, you see. Forget about, I don't have time to get into the correspondence. I noted down a few things. Look at the relationship which actually counters this WhatsApp propaganda. The relationship of Nehru and Patel. Look at their exchange of letters, their differences, the way differences are shared, the way differences are talked about in their letters. Patel did not leave behind a huge written legacy because he was a man of action. Nehru was very prolific when he thought very, very much about the world, and he expressed that in words. That's why we have a huge corpus of scholarship which he left behind. But Patel, unfortunately, didn't do that very much. We only have his speeches, and we only have his letters which he exchanged with his political leaders here and there, and with the bureaucracy. Now, I spoke a couple of places here and there. So once when I was saying something, so one RSS man got up and said, "No, what you said is actually an opinion of Patel much earlier about RSS. It changed later on." Anyway, then I started using, which I have used in my book also, a speech of Sardar Patel of 1949. He went to Madras and he addressed a public meeting. And this speech is so profound on 2-3 things: partition, RSS, and the left. In February 23, 1949. Now, and Patel dies in 1950. So he dies just a few months later. So it's not his opinion which could change. He was almost at the end of his life. In that speech, he says that we are building a new country. We have just got independence 2 years ago, and I have challenges from two corners. One is the left, another is the right. My friends from the left in Telangana, who are leading a great fight against this present new government, which is just coping with the challenges of governance, I have requested them to actually stop doing it because it won't serve any purpose. I have asked them to join the Congress party. Let us build this country together. I know they will not agree, but I have offered them several times. I offer them again from this platform in Madras. Now, then he comes to the right and see what he says. This I want to read because I don't want to miss anything. That is something very, very important. He talks about the RSS. He says that RSS, I have spoken to RSS leaders several times, but unfortunately they don't listen to me. Then he says, I told them immediately after my release from jail last time that I was prepared to take all the communists into the Congress, to forget the past and to keep the doors open, provided they give up violence. This was about the left. Then he comes to the RSS. He says, the other challenge to this new government is from the RSS. I have made them an offer, and these are his words now, I quote him. Change your plans, give up secrecy, eschew communal conflict, respect the Constitution of India, which means they were not respecting the Constitution of India till then. That's why the Home Minister and the great leader which they valorize so much today had to say this: show your loyalty to the flag, which they didn't show till 2006, and make us believe that we can trust your words. To say one thing and to do another is a game which will not do. These are the words of Sardar Patel about RSS, and it's so sad that all these writings and sayings of Sardar Patel are hidden from people. Majority of the people don't really know what Sardar Patel actually felt. These people actually don't talk about this. This is a speech which is there in all the papers. One can go and read them. But most of the people don't even know that Sardar Patel held such views about RSS. History students know about it, and most of them are aware of it. But today, in this country, today, in the context of India we are living in, these issues need to be popularized at a popular level. WhatsApp should be used actually to bring these issues to light. This is the real history which should come out, not the imagined history which is being circulated. Now, second character from history is Subhash Chandra Bose. And I chose to use just three people: Sardar Patel, about whom I have spoken a little bit, Subhash Chandra Bose, and Bhagat Singh. Because these three people are the most talked about people in their politics. Subhash Chandra Bose is valorized for INA. No? INA was his last actually effort. Talk about 1920s, talk about 1930s, which made Subhash. No? Subhash could create INA, could actually achieve what he achieved at the end of his life because he had the background or the politics which he actually was part of from 1920s and 30s. We'll not talk about that. Look at his speeches, his relentless fight against communalism, his fight for scientific temper, his fight for gender justice. No, these are all speeches of Subhash Chandra Bose. His love for Subhash Chandra Bose, for Bhagat Singh and Bhagat Singh's politics, Bhagat Singh's socialism. He actually went in 1931 to address Naujawan Bharat Sabha, founded by Bhagat Singh, after the Karachi session, after he was hanged. So he was so closely involved with that. His politics was involved with that. These people have no clue. They don't even talk about it. They only valorize his militarism. They valorize him as a military leader because that was some weakness which Subhash Chandra Bose acquired in later part of his life, from late 30s onwards. And this was one complaint of Nehru as well, who was his dear friend, and Nehru actually disagreed with him on this. And these were the issues which took them apart, fell apart. Now, Bhagat Singh is another character who is so useful for them because they use him in all their posters, all their, everywhere, all their campaigns. Bhagat Singh is one figure permanently there with Bharat Mata, without even bothering to read or to even understand Bhagat Singh's politics. The man in 1928 writes such a castigating article in Kirti, in a paper from Amritsar, which I have put together in this latest book which came out a month ago. An article on untouchability. On untouchability, we are talking about Dalit politics today and the oppression which the Dalits have gone through. Now, Bhagat Singh writes in 1928, he said, what sort of leadership we have? The Congress leaders, and he names them. He says, Madan Mohan Malviya, what is he doing? And these are his words. He goes to a public meeting, calls a Dalit, hugs him, goes back home, has a bath with his clothes on. This is Bhagat Singh. You know, a man who can speak so strongly against the senior leadership without mincing words. He was a young man of 21, when he's writing it. So, despite that, these people don't care to read. They talk about nationalism. Now, linking nationalism with religion. This is something, favorite of theirs. That dharma adharit rashtravad. Hindu dharma se hi rashtravad. Hindu ho to rashtrvadi ho. Everybody else is suspect. Majoritarian nationalism. Look at Bhagat Singh. If you valorize him, he wrote up the best article, best statement of Bhagat Singh, and the longest on why I'm an atheist. A man like him never felt the need of religion. Either he's not a nationalist, then don't valorize him, or accept what he says. He felt very strongly that you don't need religion. And that article is not a harangue against God. It is a statement on so many things. A statement on scientific temper, on rationality, on gender. One has to read that. It's a serious, and you have to keep in mind that the man who is writing is just 23. 23 and 4 months was the age when he was hanged. So a young man at the age of 21, 22, 23 could think so coherently on such serious issues. So, if Bhagat Singh was like that, if Bhagat Singh has such ideas, then go back to his writings, go back to his understanding, accept him holistically. Don't accept him piecemeal. You can't call him a nationalist, which is just partial, which is incomplete. He was nationalist, but he was a revolutionary thinker, a revolutionary nationalist, a thinker, a man of ideas who has left behind a legacy which is live, which is still there for us to read if we care to read. Well, people like him, like so many other scholars who leave behind a written legacy, they don't die. They live with their words, they live with their ideas. But the point is, we only declare them dead because we don't go and read them. So point is, you have to go and read them. These people will not do because for them he's too uncomfortable. He's so alien to them, to their idea of India. So what we need to do is to retrieve this idea of India, this pluralist idea of India, this inclusive nationalism, and challenge this WhatsApp nationalism, challenge the whole idea which is being spread so relentlessly to cultivate their own politics, to cultivate their own divisive politics, which is so inimical to the very existence of us as a nation. And this is something which we have cherished all these years, and we need to go back, we need to actually retrieve all that lost ground from the clutches of those who had actually no role at all in building this nation in which we live. Thank you.
The term anti-national has become a very common tag these days, and where one needs to prove their nationalism. Why does one need to be a chest-thumping nationalist in order to prove a point? And this wave of rising, of proving a point, proving your nationalism, how can this be dangerous to the society?
So I just wanted to know about the nationalism, the way it has been said. Even the institution has been branded as anti-national. You know what I am referring to. So how we get rid of that?
Okay, just the last question.
Yeah, so I wanted to ask you about this point that you mentioned, the enemy within. So the enemy within. So it seems that the current regime is hoping to ride on the wave of the Pulwama attack into the 2019 election. The very fact that they can do this points to the fact that there has been over the last 60 years the possibility, the very germ, the kernel has been laid out for them that they can ride on the wave of hatred against Kashmiris. So isn't that the Achilles heel of Indian nationalism? And aren't previous regimes and the discourse around nationalism sort of corrupted? In essence, isn't that an inherent defect in Indian nationalism?
To ask, how do you place the role of these big digital global corporations in the context of the WhatsApp nationalism that we've been talking about?
There was a question about the first one, about how to counter this nationalism. You know, my whole idea, the way I try to talk about, is actually the issue which the question raises. No, I am trying to say that you have to go back to actually the India, the notion of nationalism, the idea of India, which we cherished all these years, and we were very comfortable with it. There were some issues, there were some weaknesses. These weaknesses are being exploited by these people today. Javed Akhtar in the morning raised a couple of issues, which are actually, I agree with him, and there are lots of weaknesses which lots of secularists and the non-communalists, if not secularists, committed, and those weaknesses are being exploited. So we need to be conscious of that, and we need to rectify what are the problems. But surely we need to go back. The first thing is, you can go back only when you get rid of what you are living with. Yeah? If you don't get rid of it, you can't find an alternative, because if you have to actually eliminate the disease from the body. No? Only then you can look for health. So the point is, you have to find a way to get rid of it, and how we do that is for all of us to think about and ponder about. And we know the means, and this effort is one little effort in that direction. So we need to do such things at more often and at more places. And I think Mumbai is very, very fortunate. And I've been telling this to people here that in Delhi, I don't think we can imagine something like this so successful. I don't think so. A place like IIC, which is considered to be more civil, no, than other places in the city, can't hold so many people together from 10 in the morning till that late in the evening. No question. So this commitment, I'm so happy, and I feel so sad that I come from a city where I can't even imagine doing something like this. No? So this is something very, very special. We need to find such enthusiastic enclaves in more parts of the city. No? Only then we can get rid of regimes like this.
The notion of nationalism is frozen. It is a frozen notion of nationalism which is very, very active in the right-wing thinking. And you said that the goalpost is not changing at all, that's why it is frozen. And once this nationalism as the frozen concept is in vogue, you don't need to think about it. Your thinking faculty stops working. And those people who don't think about present and future and think somehow about the past cannot really contribute to the vibrant notion of nationalism. The other point which is so important, I think you are asking questions, I listened to the question in the earlier session and question in this, you are asking questions for which you already have answer. So what is the big fun in asking questions? In the first collective as well, we confronted the same thing. So we are all convinced that we require to have a very vibrant notion of nationalism in which you do not use it as a stick to beat people. You are using nationalism as a stick to beat people. You are actually keeping people on probation using nationalism. That is really coercive. It's unfair. A certain section of this country are kept on permanent probation, as if those who are putting you on probation, their record is very clean. Is that the case? So you should actually, I do not know whether you will be able to really counter this through WhatsApp and other things. But I think face-to-face dialogue is still so important, because lie has no face, but truth has face. So you have to actually do that. You should also ask this question to yourself: what kind of nation you want to really devise? Now you are being forced to wait and do not ask serious questions to nation. What are the serious questions? Farmers are committing suicide, unemployment is budging, people are becoming uncertain. As Sainath says, there's a footloose migration, people don't know in which direction they will get a job. All this uncertainty has been placed before you, and do you want to live with these uncertainties and yet think about the nation? You are making people to wait for that. You are actually subordinating all these genuine important questions to this notion of nation that you are actually dishing out. I think this is what is important. And we have to actually reformulate nationalism differently. Sitting in the hall is fine, sir. You don't get such a big gathering in Delhi, I agree with you, because IISc is not the right place to really think about this whole thing. Though I go and conduct my meetings there as well. So you have enthusiasm, you are urged to change, have dialogue with people, but we are talking about those people who are on the margin, who are on the fence, who are 50-50, who are not actually indoctrinated. So there you have to actually find a space for your new thinking of nationalism. And I think that will really marginalize the WhatsApp University, as Ravish Kumar calls very famously. Instead of actually reducing nation to slogan or to that fear fighter there on the top or the submarine, you have to actually bring nation down to the very living human beings, their problems. And that is how the nation is bigger, because your people are very, very at the center of your concern, your attention. People don't seems to be at the attention of this government. So we will have to redefine nation accordingly. I think that's what I thought I should speak for 2-3 minutes. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity.